Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Me.
So,
Amen.
hi David, welcome. So what I'm gonna do is I need to also we may be getting into the borders of the land of Israel, and I wanted to see what I could do yeah, I have actually a reasonable picture of it. So I wanted to put that as part of the share. Give me one moment as I share. I needed to boot that up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what you're seeing, of course, is the text, but let me just briefly show you the other piece. Let me see if I can, okay. Let's see if that'll work. No, not, hmm, hmm. I'm trying to see if I can sort of move this in a way. There's the borders. Okay, so there you see them. That's the started line here. It wasn't, interestingly enough, and that's what eventually this chapter here in Numbers is going to do, is to define the actual borders of the land of Israel, of what would be the land of Israel. So, okay, so let's get into here. Find them. Here we are. Okay. So we just finished describing the journeys and at this point, of course, they're going to be entering, they haven't yet, but they are going to be entering the land of what will subsequently be the land of Israel. And they get these commands from God, right? V'hitnachaltem et haaretz bagoral. You shall apportion the land according to lot. Sorry, I put in too many T's there. Okay. Lemishpechotechem, according to your families, right? Larav tarbu et nachalato, to the large, in other words, to the large family, you shall make great their portion, their inheritance, their portion. Ulema'at, and to the small, tam'itna nachalato, you shall cause their portion to be small, you shall reduce their portion. El Asher Yetze Lo Shama Hagoral. And let's see, I felt the way to translate this is, so El is, of course, to Asher Yetze Lo Shama Hagoral. So, in other words, to whom the lot falls there, Shama, there, the lot, Goral, Lo Yeh, it shall be his. Lamatot avotechem titnechalu, according to your ancestral, your father's tribes, you shall inherit. You shall inherit. There is, as Rashi's going to say, there's a lot, even though this verse is fairly long, there's still a lot of information that's sort of crunched together in this verse. So we'll take a look at the Rashi right now. If we can, okay, I'm going to go down here and see if it appears once again when I go back in. Yes, there it is. I don't know why that happens, but something electronic clearly. El asher yetze lo shama, right? To the one to whom it comes out there. Mikra katsarhu. It is an abbreviated verse. This is an abbreviated verse. So here he tries to fill in the words. El makom asher yetze lo shama hagoral. To the place to whom the lot will fall, lo yeh, it shall be his. So what's interesting is that it talks about making their portion large or small according to the size of the family. And then it also talks about using lots in which to, I think, the way one can harmonize it is to say the actual location. In other words, where exactly the family would occupy, the actual place would be according to lot. But how large that area would be would depend on the size of the family. And so those were those two factors involved in apportioning the land. lematot avotechem, according to the tribes of your fathers, your ancestors. And this is a reference to Baba Batra Kuf Yud Zayin, tractate in the Talmud, Baba Batra 117. Lefi cheshbon yotzei Mitzrayim. It should go according to the census, the counting of those who left Egypt. Davar acher, another interpretation. Bishneim asar gvulim. There should be 12 borders demarcated per keminyan hashvatim, according to the number of tribes. Going on. Ve'im, here we go. Ve'im lo torishu, excuse me, 1 second. Im lo torishu et yoshvei haaretz mipnechem. And if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land before you, v'haya asher totiru mehem, those to whom you leave, those who remain, right? L'sikim be'enechem, they will be spikes in your eyes, v'letzninim b'tzidechem, and thorns in your sides, v'tzararu etchem, and they shall chase after, right? Or something. They actually have the translation that they'll persecute you, right? Al haaretz, on the land asher atem yoshvim ba, in which you inhabit. Again, one of those difficult verses, which sound like it is suggesting things that are very, very hard. I mean, this is, again, it sounds genocidal, and we just have to deal with these sorts of things. And to my mind, the most direct way of saying it is that there are no Canaanites left, whether this verse is righteous or not. And of course, it's very hard to simply accept it on face value. The fact is that the people who are there now are actually our relatives. They're not. They're not Canaanites. They're not idolaters. I mean, not only are they, in a sense, related to us by blood, but they also share very deep religious beliefs with us, even if they're not exactly the same. And to use these kinds of verses as excuses to persecute the Arabs that are there is just wrong, in my humble opinion. And the Bible is not telling us to do that. And we get back to, where's your heart on this? So here we go. Rashi simply trying to explain the meaning of these words. V'haya asher totiru mehem, and it shall be that which remain of them. You lachem lera'ah. They will not be good for you. They will be evil for you. The sikim be'enechem. So he says, sikim is yitdot. Those are like tent pins, right? Spikes. Hanikrim enechem, which will gouge out your eyes. Tigum shel yitdot sichya, so, or sikaya. That's probably sikaya, which is a plural ending in Aramaic, right? So the Aramaic translation of yitdot is sikaya, and here we are importing it into the Hebrew as sikim here. Yeah. So let's see here. Oh, so what I was trying to think about was, what do we mean by that? In other words, here we have this metaphor, right? It's not a literal expression, but does it mean, by saying, as Rashi explains, gouging out your eyes means that you'll be led in the wrong direction? Is that simply a very intense way of saying that they will influence you in very bad ways? And I think that's simply what it's saying. It's not a literal statement. Litzini, it's litzninim, right? So for thorns. So he explains, potrim bo ha-potrin lashon, those who explain, in other words, linguists, right? People who look into the meaning of words. Mesukat kotzim, right? So we're talking about it's The metaphor is describing a barrier of thorns, hasochechet etchem, which encompasses you, liskor, to pin you in, ulichlo etchem, and again, lichlo means to imprison you, me'en yotzeh uva, so there can be no one who can come and go. In other words, it creates a barrier of thorns to prevent you from coming in and out. And again, a metaphor. Uh, does it mean here that, again, the kind of influence they'll have on you, that you will not be able to think straight? Okay, so that the coming and going here, again, isn't physical coming and going, but rather like when we use an expression like thinking outside the box, because our thoughts can also, in a way, they travel. Vitzareru etchem. So this word, kitargumo, and he says, just as the Aramaic translation translates it, will persecute you. So here we go, because let's see. Here we go. Here's the Aramaic. Here's the Onkelos here, right? Vihi kama dichashavit. Oh, wait a second. Sorry, that's the next verse. So Va'ikrun lachon al ara di atun yatvin ba. That's okay. So ye'ikun lachon, right? This word ye'ikun must be an Aramaic word that means to persecute, right? They will persecute you on the land. So this is the word that Rashi's referring to here. V'haya ka'asher dimiti lasot lahem e'eseh lachem. And that which I intended to do to them, I will do to you. And that's, I think, a very significant, this last little verse here is extremely significant. That it's saying that, justice applies across the board. And that if, in fact, the Jewish people or the Israelites behave in the way that the Canaanites behave, they're going to be driven out, they're going to be persecuted, they're going to be killed. And unfortunately, of course, as you read biblical history, this is exactly what happened, sadly. So, I mean, that in some ways, when you look at the first part and you take it along with this part, you could see it more as a dire warning. In other words, that the emphasis isn't so much what you should be doing to these other nations. It's more saying to be careful and not to wind up doing just the same. That on some very powerful level, you need to earn the blessings and earn the benefits that you have as a human being. And I'm going to tip my yarmulke to Lauren, because she really introduced me to this idea of feeling entitled, this idea of entitlement. And I will leave it to you to decide to what degree this describes human behavior. That when people are blessed, instead of seeing those blessings as really, really great gifts and privileges, we see them as entitlements. And that's, I think, a really discipline. That not looking at life in that particular way is something we have to learn. We have to be willing to teach ourselves. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. In fact, the opposite is true. We tend to sort of take for granted the blessings that come our way. And of course, the other piece to this, and there's a lot more that can be said, which I won't necessarily say now, is that in some ways, this is where happiness is found. That real happiness is found in the ability to recognize the ways in which we are blessed in so many countless ways. Next chapter. Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. So the Lord spoke to Moses, quote, as Dr. Barmesh likes to say, Tzav et bnei Israel, command the children of Israel, v'amarta alehem, and say to them, Ki atem ba'im el haaretz Canaan. Ki atem. So here the word ki has a lot of meanings, but I believe here it means when, right? When you come to the land of Canaan. Because ki can also mean because, except that word does not make sense in this context, right? So when you come into the land of Canaan, Zot haaretz, this is the land, Asher tipol lachem benachala, which will literally tipol is from the root nafal, that will fall to you according to as an inheritance. Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan, ligvulo teha, according to its borders, according to its borders. Let's take a look at this. Here we go. Zot haaretz asher tipol lachem. This is the land which will fall to you. And Rashi is intrigued by this word fall, right? And he explains, Lefi sheharbe mitzvot. So why is this, what's the significance here of defining the borders and the extent of the land? And he explains, Lefi sheharbe mitzvot nohagot be'aretz. Oh, right. It's because there are many mitzvot, many commandments that apply to the land. Ve'ein nohagin b'chutz la'aretz, and they do not apply outside the land of Israel. Hutzrach lichtov. So Scripture has to write mitzarnei gvulei ruchotea saviv. It has to define the extent of its borders around. In other words, the various directions of its borders, and define what is considered in the land, so that you know what's in the land and what's out of the land, and so that you'll know which mitzvot you are to perform, which only apply within the borders of the land of Israel. Lomar lecha, to say to you, min hagvulim halalu, from these borders, velifnim, and within these borders, hamitzvot nagot, these mitzvot, these commandments apply. Here we go. Tipol lachem, shall fall to you. Al shem shenitchalka begoral, and because the land was divided up according to lot, Nikret Chaluka Lashon Nefila. That's why it's division, right? So it doesn't say Tachalok Lachem. It doesn't say Asher Tachalok Lachem, which you will divide up amongst yourselves. It says, it uses a term that refers Nefila, casting lots. So that's why the verb is used there. He explains it. Umidrash Agada, there are also Agadic explanations of this. Omer, it says, Al Yedei, and the reason is, and this word, again, focusing and riffing on this word, hipil, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, caused to fall, Sarehem, right? And he says, Shivim Umot. So I think this could be a misprint, because we talk about the 7 Canaanite nations, but here he says that God caused the princes, or the leaders of 70 nations. Now, there is a significance to 70 nations, and that is, of course, that's considered the nations that comprise the world's nations, that there were 70 descendants of Noah, and they represent all the different nations. But I min hashamayim, from the heavens, the kiftan lifnei Moshe, and he shackled them. God shackled them before Moses. Amar lo, and said to him, Re'eh, see, ein bahem od koach. They no longer have any strength. So I am pretty certain that this is a misprint. It should be shiv instead of shivim, and this is the alphabetical equivalent of 70. It should have said the princes of the 7 nations, referring to the Canaanites, because it doesn't really make any sense to suggest that other princes from other nations also were bound before Moses. Moses didn't. All he had to know and be reassured is that the Canaanites would not represent any serious obstacle to the inheriting the land. So you can.
Mine says 7.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. This is a misprint. Okay, good. So there we go. It was a good guess. V'hayalachem pa'at negev. So now we get into the borders. The southern border shall be to you Mimid Bar Tzin, from the desert of Tzin, al Yedei Edom, near Edom, Vahaya Lachem Gvul Negev, and the southern border, Miktzei Yam HaMelech Kedma, will go from the end of the edge of the sea, the Dead Sea, right? It means literally it means the Salt Sea. Kedma would be eastward. Okay, so let's take a look briefly and see what's going on here. Okay, so here is the wilderness of Tzin, and so we're saying that the border goes from here up to this end. Okay, that's part of the southern border. They're still going to have to end. The southern border goes this side as well to the Mediterranean. But this is what we're talking about here, the wilderness of Tzin. And of course, you can recognize the Dead Sea. Going back, let's do that. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, let's take a look at the Rashi for today. V'haya lachem pa'at Negev, and your southern edge, right? Ruach dromit. So the word Negev, of course, refers to that dry, arid area to the south of the land of Israel. And Rashi just clarifies. He says Ruach dromit. The Darom is south, the southern direction. Asher min hamizrach lemarav. In other words, on the south, going from the east to the west. Mimid Bar Tzin, from the desert or the wilderness of Tzin, Asher Etzel Edom, which is near Edom, Mitchilat Miktsoa Dromit, okay, from the beginning of or Matchelet, begins, maybe we'll translate it as that, begins the southern edge, Mizrachit, going east, Shel Eretz Tisha Hamatot, which is going to be the land of the 9 tribes. Ketzad, how? Shlosh Atzot Yoshvot Bidroma Shel Eretz Israel. There are 3 lands that occupy the south, or occupy the south of the land of Israel. Zo etzel zo, one next to the other. Ktsat Eretz Mitzrayim, either it means the end of the land or a little bit of the land of Egypt. Ve'eretz Edom, and the land of Edom, Kula, all of it. Ve'eretz Moav, Kula, and all the land of Moab. And so he says, let's see, Eretz Mitzrayim, so the land of Egypt, b'miktsua dromit maravit. It is on the southwestern side. Shinemar beParsha zo, because as it says in this Parsha, me Atzmon Nachala Mitzrayim, from Atzmon, the Nachala Mitzrayim. So Nachala, of course, can mean the portion of Egypt. Vayu totsotav hayama, and it shall end at the sea. And I think here it's referring to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nachal Mitzrayim hayam mahalech al pnei kol eretz Mitzrayim, and the river, will show you the picture of it in the map, and the river or the Wadi of Egypt would extend the whole side of the land of Egypt, Shene'emar, as it states in Joshua 13, Min HaShichor, this is another word for this, from the Shichor Asher al Pnei Mitzrayim, which is on the border of Egypt. Umafsik bein Eretz Mitzrayim le'Eretz Yisrael, and it it divides the land of Egypt from the land of Israel. The Eretz Edom Itzla, and the land of Edom is next to it, Letzad HaMizrach, on the east side. The Eretz Moav Etzel Eretz Edom, and the land of Moab next to the land of the land of Moab next to the land of Edom, Besof Hadarom, at the edge of on the southern edge, LeMizrach, on the east. So in other words, you've got Egypt going in an easterly direction, you've got the border of Egypt, you've got Edom, and then you've got Moab. Ukeshiyatzu Yisrael mimitzrayim. And when the children of Israel left the land of Egypt, went out from the land of Egypt, Imratza hamakom lekarev et knisatam laaretz, had God wanted to shorten their journey, in other words, to make it easier for them to go into the land, right? So, let's see. Hayam ma'aviram et hanilus. He would have them cross the Nile, letzad safon, on the northern side, uva'en leIsrael, and that way they would come to the land of Israel. Velo asachen, but he didn't do this. V'zehu shenamar, and that's exactly what is written in Exodus chapter 13. Velo nicham Elohim, and the Lord did not guide them derech eretz plishtim, by way of the land of the Philistines. Shehem yoshvim al hayam, who the Philistines. The land of the Philistines is because the Philistines occupy the area next to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. B'ma'arava, on the west side, shall Eretz Canaan, of the land of Canaan. Ki'inyan shene'emar beplishtim, as it states regarding the Philistines in the prophet Zephaniah chapter 2, Yoshvei Chevel Hayam, those who live by the seashore. Goy Kratim, a land. I think it is actually maybe referring to Crete, okay? Because we know that the Philistines actually came from Crete. V'lo nicham oto haderech, and God did not guide them by that way. Ela hesivam, but he rather made them go around. V'hotziam derech droma, and he took them out on the southern way. El Hamidbar, towards the wilderness. V'hu shekaro Yizcheskel, and this is what Ezekiel refers to in, I guess this is chapter 20. Midbar ha'amim, the wilderness of the people, the fi shehayu kamo umot, kama umot, and the reason is that there were several nations, yoshvot betzido, that dwelt alongside it. Veholchin etzel dromo min ha'ma'arav, and they went from the south towards the east. No, sorry. On the south, from the west, Klape Mizrach, towards the east, Tamid, constantly, Ad Sheba Lodroma Shel Eretz Edom, until they came to the south edge of the southern border of the land of Edom. Uvvakshu mimelech Edom, and they requested from the king of Edom, Sheyanicham la'avor derech arzod, to allow them to pass over by way of his land, ulikanes la'aretz, and to enter the land, meaning, of course, the land of Canaan, derech rechava, in an easy way. V'lo ratzah, but he didn't want it. He refused. V'hutzrachu lisavov et kol droma shel Edom, and so they had to go around, right, the entire southern border of Edom, ad bo'am ledroma shel Eretz Moav, until they came to the southern border of the land of Moab, Shinemar. And how do we know this? It says, and this is with Jephthah in Judges chapter 11, V'gam el melech Moab shalach v'lo ava, and they sent word to the king of Moab, and he refused. V'halchu kol droma shel Moab, so they went on the entire southern edge of Moab, ad sofa, to the end, umisham hafchu pneihem letzafon, and from that point then they headed northwards, ad shesavavu kol Meitzar, until they went around the entire border, Mizrachi, the eastern border, Shelah, of it, in other words, of Moab, Lirchava, right, according by its width. Ukeshekalu et mizracha, and when they finished traveling along its eastern border, matzu et eretz Sichon, they then found they were in the land of Sichon v'Og, and Og, shayu yoshvim b'mizracha shel Eretz Canaan, who were dwelling on the east side of the land of Canaan, the Hayarden and the Jordan, mafsik beinehem, divided the both of them. V'zehu shnemar beyiftach, and this also is mentioned regarding Jephthah. Vayelech, he says there, because he's talking to the king that's oppressing the Israelites at that time. He is trying to offer them terms of peace and reconciliation, and he goes over the history of the Jewish people and how they wound up in the land of Canaan. Vayelech bamidbar, and he went in the wilderness. Vayasov et Eretz Edom, and he went around the land of Edom. Ve'et Eretz Moav, and the land of Moab. Vayavo mimizrach Shemesh, and he came from the eastern direction, the Eretz Moav, into the land of Moab. Ukivshu et Eretz Sichon, and they conquered the land of Sichon ve'Og and Og, shehaita b'tzfuna shel Eretz Moav, which was north of the land of Moab. Vayavo mimizrach Shemesh le'Eretz Moav, and they came from the east into the land of Moab. V'kivshu et Eretz forgive me. Sorry, I skipped a line. Let me make sure. Yes, V'karvu ad Hayarden, and they drew near to the Jordan. Vehi keneged miktzot tzfonit ma'aravit shel Eretz Moav, and that is opposite the edge of the northwest corner of the land of Moab. And so you find now that the land of Canaan, shebe'ever Hayarden, on the other side of the Jordan, le'ma'arav haya, it was now on the west, haya mikzoa dromit mizrachit shela, on the the southeastern side of it, Etzel Edom, near Edom. So let's take a look now. We'll stop here in terms of the text. Let me make a note of where we are. Very, very long Rashi. 1 second. And I'll put us there, and we'll take a look at the map. So here we are. Here's, of course, they said the brook or the Wadi of Egypt, right? So you see that there. And they're going here. And look here, the border of Edom. And this is up here is, I'm going to guess, the border of Moab. So the Israelites, in terms of their wanderings, were going all here, up here. And here you'll see that it talks, I believe, it's going to talk, this up here is the land of Sichon and Og, right here. And it's also a very fertile area within the land of Israel. This northern area here is much more fertile. So this is what happens. They went up, here's the Jordan River. They were on the east side of Jordan River. They moved up towards here, and this is where they were attacked by Sichon and Og, etc., and they managed to conquer them. So you have a little bit of a sense of the directions that we're talking about here. And I will stop the share here. Okay? Any thoughts before I stop the recording? So essentially, again, I think that perhaps one of the most important elements here is the idea that there's certain mitzvot that only apply to the land of Israel, and that's the reason why we needed to describe and define the borders of Israel. And next time we discuss this portion, we'll simply go on and finish up defining the borders. So thank you.